Welcome and thanks for joining us. My guest today is Don Woodard, a Senior Solutions Engineer for Federal Government Solutions at Ping Identity. Don, thank you so much for joining me.
I appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
Of course. Don, to kick off the conversation, modern ICAM frameworks are designed to ensure that the right person has access to the right information at the right time. How does a zero trust identity architecture help agencies deliver on that goal?
So making sure and we understand the importance of this, of having the right person at the right time. But let's add in another aspect to this, and that is from a perspective of location zero trust architecture of identity in the pillar is super important. It also becomes the very first aspect of enforcement of the security policy. And certainly zero trust architecture is how we're going to operationalize this. And it's going to be very important to do so. This enables us to have just-in-time identity verification. So as we approach into validating and authorizing somebody to come into the area. So let me break this down into a little story. I've got a nice big mansion. It's a big place. And I get a knock at the door. And I authenticate my friend to come into the door. But it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to have access to all the other doors inside of my mansion. And this comes down to least privilege. Least privilege is going to make sure that they don't have access to certain doors. So we're going to take that a step further, and inside those doors we're going to have different drawers, we're going to have different cabinets, all of which are going to pertain to identity. And we need to get down into further aspects of that. And I'll talk about that more in a few minutes.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll talk about access and authorization in a couple of minutes. Before we do that, as agencies are on their path to modernizing, it's, well, let's actually start with the common challenge that agencies have across the federal government, which is their legacy systems. And of course, those legacy systems and applications were not built for today's security and interoperability demands. How can ICAM solutions meet the modernization and security demands without requiring this complete overhaul or this complete rip and replace approach?
Yeah. So it's going to be very, very important to make sure that we're not ripping and replacing, because it's going to become too expensive, too timely. Going back to my story, in the mansion has these beautiful rooms with the beautiful cabinetry. Those locks, they were put in place back in the 1910s, for instance. So they're going to have very limited type of security behind those. We don't want to rip and replace those locks, because the architecture of that room and that building, it met what it needed to meet back then. But today, this legacy cabinet, this legacy drawer with this lock is not going to be enough. So we need to build systems, and we have the capability within Ping Identity to make sure that we have these least privilege and controlling the access and getting down into having a secure bridge from having a legacy system or lock that was built in 1910 to today's security structures coming in from the zero trust architectures and other capabilities around what those are.
And it's critical for agencies, especially for agencies like the Defense Department, to securely collaborate, to securely share data. What kind of identity federation model is best suited to support that level of interoperability that the Defense Department, for example, requires?
Knowing that our Defense Department has some huge challenges in operationalizing this. We have mission partners, we have systems, both legacy and modern systems, we have soldiers, we have float type of military. And having a decentralized model, allowing these individual systems, mission partners to control their own identity environments. And then putting in systems like what Ping Identity has to truly federate and have a a decentralized model. so that you allow for the user experience from the soldier in the field having access into a federated model, and then they are given the authority to then have access to those other systems if they're given access. On the opposite side of the coin, our mission partners internationally also want to gain access to some of our assets that we allow them to have access to. So going back to the storyline, you allow the soldier into the house, but that soldier doesn't have access into certain rooms. Or maybe there is access to a room and that soldier doesn't have access to one of the cabinets because there are maybe several drawers behind that cabinet.
Let's just get into authorization and access, because of course it's Federation helps agencies to verify a person, and that's part of enabling secure collaboration. Once you're inside the system, like you said, then the next challenge is managing what they can access inside that mention. So yeah, why is fine-grained authorization important for controlling what users can access once inside the system, and especially in high security environments?
So it's a great question, and that is a huge challenge in today's world. Getting into that fine-grained control, being able to have real-time access control into those systems. Because the soldier has come into the house, he enters into a room, he sees that there's a cabinet. That cabinet has many drawers. Maybe there is information in one drawer that he may have access to or allowed access, but in another drawer he doesn't have access to. So that fine-grained control is going to give him the capability to have the authority and the authorization to go into that drawer. And to simplify this, maybe that drawer has sterling silver from when our great-grandmother had put it together, and another drawer may have a military type of rifle from Civil War. And so you want to be able to separate who has access to what. You may want to not allow them to have access to the sterling silver, because that's too precious to your family. But the soldier would then have access to a military weapon because they want to go out and do reenactments.
And then, of course, another challenge that I wanted to talk to you about is onboarding and offboarding. How do these multiple disconnected identity systems increase security and access risk throughout this process? And also, could you talk about what can be done to streamline identity lifecycle management?
Sure. So in these disparate systems, we have identities that are found within mission partners or even within interagency, where there is not necessarily the rights from one bucket of identities that has access to another bucket of identities. And if somebody were to be offboarded from that system, you would need to have the capability to make sure that they are removed, but also that their fine-grained controls over to another system are also removed. So the lifecycle governance is going to make sure that you have the ability to make sure to make those changes that affect the enterprise-wide and not necessarily just siloed in a particular bucket of identities.
Yeah. And Don, before we run out of time, could you talk about what your priorities are in this space in fiscal 2025 going into fiscal 2026?
So our main focus is really the federation of the identities. It is super, super important to make sure that we as an industry give the customers within the DoD the capability to have that truly federated model. Modernizing this is going to be a huge effort, and Ping Identity has the solutions to bring the modern identity capabilities to meet all of these challenges, whether it be that mission partner internationally or it be that there is a legacy system that needs security controls because it was built back in the day. So that is our guidance in what Ping Identity wants to achieve this year.
Yeah, and That's one of the highest priorities for the Defense Department.
It is. Yes.
Federation of ICAM is, they just had a memo that came out in November of last year on ICAM Federation, so it's one of the highest priorities for the DoD CIO office.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Don, thank you so much. We unfortunately ran out of time, but so much to talk about.
Well, I appreciate the time. Thank you for having me.
I'd like to thank today's guest, Don Woodard, a Senior Solutions Engineer for Federal Government Solutions at Ping Identity. I'm Anastasia Obis, and you're watching Federal News Network. Now let me send you back to the studio for more on the Cloud Exchange.